I wish to address the issue of this gentleman. He is my servant, and I am here to pay the debt against him.
It's so late.
Hello, and welcome to the next installment of the making of this dress from 1998's Ever After film. The shift and the underdress have been made, and this video is all about those delicious oversleeves. Let's take a closer look at those. They are two-piece sleeves that have seams along the backs of the arms, not ties to hold each sleeve piece together. They are made of an olive-colored velvet that just kind of looks like glorious 90s crushed velvet in these lightings, and it has gold trimming on the edges. If you've seen the other videos, you know that this dress was sewn all as one, so the sleeves aren't actually tied on in any way. This whole project was actually inspired by seeing this olive velvet fabric being sold by Fancy Styles Fabric a few months ago, and I immediately thought of this particular dress. It is a silk rayon velvet in a dress weight and very flowy and slippery and lovely, and I'll be using linen in a medium weight as the lining. Luckily for the patterning, we are at a point in this project where most of the guesswork is done. The sleeves in the film look right out of a 1490s painting. Both of these oversleeves are two pieces with cutouts which allow for the sleeve to puff out of them and are tied on. And because of this, you'll never guess what sleeves view 5 of the period patterns number 41 has. They're actually almost exactly what I need for this project. This sleeve pattern is just a bit more simple than what's in the film, so I am redrawing the pattern with the cutouts to match. The bottom sleeve piece is actually the same as the top piece in the film, just inverted and cut slimmer because, the forearm is smaller than the upper arm. But essentially they're the same shape and have the same curve. I only have footage of me adding the curves to this upper sleeve, but I did the same thing on the bottom sleeve piece. And here's some footage of Millie using the cat litter box. And poof, I bothered to change into the whole look, proving to myself that with only one mock-up, it's time to rock and roll on the actual sleeves. But first, I did want to make sure that some small adjustments were made to the hand drawing so that everything was actually symmetrical. I didn't really change the pattern, I just wanted the sleeve pattern to be the same on both sides. I cut out these pattern pieces in the actual fabric, starting with the easy one, which is the lining. Now, the velvet is a bit more complicated. With this, I have to pay attention to the nap or the direction of the velvet with the fibers. You know how when you brush up or down or sideways, velvet feels different. And also, when they're stacked on top of each other, the fabric is so freaking slippy that it would be impossible for me to cut two at the same time with it folded in half. Because of these concerns, I didn't fold over the fabric and instead cut out each of the 4 pieces separately so that I could make sure that nothing was sliding and I was cutting out the pattern piece just how I wanted it. I also had to spend an embarrassingly long amount of time trying to decide which direction was the best way, so I just sat there petting the velvet in all 4 directions so many times until I figured out that, okay, this direction is the one I want going down the arm. With all 8 of our pieces, it's time to move on to assembly. Each sleeve piece is started by pinning the right side of the velvet to the lining. Doesn't matter which side, it's the same because it's linen, which can be tricky because the velvet has the fiber sticking up on it, so it wants to shift left and right. I spent a lot of time just trying to adjust the linen just right so that all the edges met up perfectly. Now watch me try to sew this with no adjustments to tension, no needle change, no thought of changing the sewing foot. Spoiler alert, it does not go well. As I said so many times already in this video, there was just way too much velvet sliding around and I had absolutely no control of what was happening. You can see as I try to push the velvet so it doesn't, you see how it's like bubbling up, and it took me a few tries before I was like, this is not happening, and I just had to rip out all the stitching and give it a little thought. So I threw on my walking foot in hopes that it would keep the velvet and the linen going through the machine together as one instead of the top or the bottom shifting. And this still kind of didn't really work. You can see that the velvet is like pulling to the left, and you can see a big chunk of that lining fabric poking out the other side, but I wasn't really sure how to fix that other than basting, and I feel like basting would be a waste of my time, and I know it's not, and I know it would have made this so much easier, but I thought, it'll be okay in the end. And somehow as I went along in the pieces, like this first one was definitely the worst moving, and then by the time I got to the last one, the edges were lined up pretty good. And I don't know, I wasn't really doing anything different. Like, this doesn't take any skill to push this fabric through the machine. But this first piece was just sort of, it just wanted to be a disaster. And the other ones were much better. I just stitched around all the edges and then left an inch or two opening on one side so that I can turn it right sides out. Before turning, I wanted to clip those corners so that it will get a crisper edge. Then you just use brute force to get the thing flipped right side out. To get those corners out, I like to use a pin to coax out all the way up to where that seam is so that the corners will go nice and square. With the sleeve pieces now assembled, I decided to hand sew that seam that's going to go down the back of the arm on both panels, and I'm just whipping those together, trying to only catch the lining so that these stitches and this white thread doesn't show to the front. And also while doing this, I sewed closed the gap I left open in order to turn it right side out. And no judging my Christmas pajamas in November, all right? This year we can use happiness wherever we can find it. The actual assembly of the sleeves is now done, and the rest is just trimmings. From some half-assed internet research, I opted for sewing metal rings to the sleeves instead of eyelets for the cording to go through to attach all the pieces together from the shoulder to the top piece to the bottom piece. I got these on Etsy, and I think they're actually for jewelry making, but I wanted ones that were pretty big, and most of it hides under on the underside and just pokes out a little bit so I can put the cording through them. To attach, I used some doubled up thread and made lots of small stitches around the ring through only the lining layer, and just went all the way around where the ring was overlapping with the lining. Using some random cord I had, I was now able to actually put the sleeves on over the rest of the outfit and check the true fit of the sleeves with the top tied on. I was actually really happy with the fit and how poofy the shift sleeve was underneath. And I used this fitting to also mark out where I should attach the rings to tie the top and the bottom sleeve pieces together. I wanted this to be in the most discreet location because I'm trying to be more historical by having the ties, but the movie doesn't have any ties. I assume that the oversleeve is just stitched onto the undersleeve and something underneath the garment that we can't see is holding those oversleeves together to make the silk part poof out more. I chose for the ties from the top and the bottom to be sort of in the inner part of my arm so that like when my arms are flat at my side, you can't see them. For the trimming on the edges of the sleeve, it's super hard to see what is used in the film, but it is definitely gold and along all of the edges. So after shopping around, I ended up finding this trim on Etsy from Palladia Trims, and I'm just delighted with it. And I think it looks exactly how I imagine the trim looked in the movie, even though all we have are some grainy photos. I cut the trim to size with enough extra to turn under the edges at the seams where it's starting and stopping as a way to finish off the edges. I decided to attach this trim by hand using matching gold, shiny, glittery thread that my mom had lying around in a sewing box. I did this using back stitches starting on the outer edge to make sure that the trim covered up where the white lining was trying to show. Then I added another line of back stitches to attach the inner edge of the trim. So there is pretty spaced out back stitches along the top and the bottom edge of the trim going all the way around. And then the edges of the trim that are turned under to finish are then also stitched together right above the seam of the sleeve. And this took me a stupid amount of time to attach, so it's a good thing I had a nice long road trip to work on it and a little mini vacation where I also worked on it. I did one more try on to get the lengths of the cording I needed to cut right. It was out of gold cord that I bought, which I don't really like because it doesn't match the other gold of the trim, so I'm not really focusing on it here. But I did switch out the cord to be not this just like plain linen cord and to be gold. I'll see what I do in the future. I'm not sure if I'll end up being happy with that. But drum roll, please. Here are the sleeves in all of their glory. And here's a little side-by-side comparison between the film and what I made. I can't even express how happy I am with this project now that the sleeves have been added. And it's just making me extremely eager to get working on the overgown, which will be the next video. So subscribe if you want to see how the last layer of this project gets completed.